The movie begins in the year 1850, where we are introduced to a writer who has just arrived in a small town. He visits a house and tells the lady living there that he is a writer. She invites him inside because he has actually come to meet her husband, Thomas. The writer tells Thomas that he wants to hear a true story, an incident that really happened. He even offers him money in exchange for it, but Thomas immediately gets angry and refuses. He tells the writer to look it up in some government records instead because he has no interest in talking about it. Hearing this, the writer decides to leave, but Thomas's wife stops him. She assures him that she will convince her husband. Later, she explains to Thomas that they are in need of money and that sharing the story could help them. Eventually, Thomas agrees. Before he starts, Thomas warns the writer that this is the most painful chapter of his life. He says that he will only tell him as much as he can bear to hear. Thomas then takes us back to the 18th century, a time when people hunted whales because whale oil was extremely valuable and many businesses depended on it. We are then introduced to a young man named Owen who works for a whaling company. Hunting whales is his profession, and he is one of the company's most skilled men. One day, Owen meets the head of the company, who tells him that they are sending a huge and very expensive ship out to sea for their next whaling expedition. The company owner informs Owen that he will serve as the ship's first officer. However, Owen is disappointed because he had hoped to become the captain of the vessel. Instead, the company appoints another man named George as the captain. To calm Owen down, they offer him a higher salary, and after some hesitation, he accepts the decision. As the expedition draws near, Owen prepares to leave for the mission. Before his departure, his wife gives him a locket and wishes him the best of luck. At the same time, we see George saying goodbye to his father before setting sail on the dangerous journey. Soon, everyone is ready to set sail, and a large crowd gathers at the harbor to see them off. Among them, we also see a young boy named Thomas, the very same Thomas who is narrating this story to the writer in the present day. As the crew boards the ship, Owen finally comes face to face with Captain George. From their very first interaction, it is obvious that the two do not get along, and there is a clear sense of tension between them. With all the preparations complete and their loved ones left behind, the crew finally sets sail, beginning their long and dangerous journey across the sea. As the ship sails farther into the ocean, it suddenly runs into a serious problem. Since Owen is the most experienced man on board, he quickly takes control of the situation and manages to sort everything out. His actions impress the entire crew, and he becomes the hero in everyone's eyes. Seeing this, Captain George starts feeling jealous of him. The very next day, Owen notices a massive storm forming in the distance. He immediately goes to George and warns him that they should not continue any farther. However, George refuses to listen and orders the crew to keep moving forward. Soon, the ship sails straight into the storm. The violent waves and powerful winds create complete chaos. Owen repeatedly shouts that they need to turn the ship around, but George stubbornly ignores his advice. The vessel suffers heavy damage, and the crew faces one terrifying moment after another. Somehow, despite all the destruction, they manage to survive and finally escape the storm. The movie then jumps forward by 3 months. At last, the crew reaches a part of the ocean where whales are everywhere. Everyone is overjoyed because this is exactly what they had been searching for. The hunters lower their boats into the water and head out to begin the hunt. Owen successfully hunts down a whale, and the crew brings its enormous body back to the ship. They then begin extracting oil from it. Since Thomas is the youngest member of the crew, Owen sends him inside the whale to help with the process. Several more days pass, but they fail to make another successful catch. Eventually, they decide to stop at a nearby island. There, they come across another captain who had also arrived in search of whales. The captain then tells them a story from his past. He says that somewhere in the ocean, there is a monstrous whale known as the Great Whale. According to him, the creature is unbelievably huge, and he once tried to hunt it. But instead of becoming the hunter, he became the prey. The great whale attacked his ship, destroyed it, broke his arm, and killed most of his crew. After sharing this terrifying story, the captain leaves. However, his words ignite greed in the hearts of Owen and the others, and they decide to search for the legendary beast themselves. Following the directions they were given, the crew eventually reaches the area where the great whale is said to live. They lower their small boats into the water and begin searching. As they move deeper into the sea, the great whale suddenly attacks Owen's boat. Everyone is left completely shocked by the size and power of the creature. A few moments later, the whale disappears. Nearby, they spot another ordinary whale and decide to hunt it instead. But while they are distracted, they notice that the great whale has launched an attack on their main ship. George realizes what has happened and rushes back. When he sees the terrible condition of the ship, he orders everyone to abandon it immediately. Since the vessel is badly damaged and beyond saving, the entire crew climbs into the smaller boats and leaves it behind. About a month later, we see that they are still stranded in the middle of the ocean. Everyone is worried, and their food supplies are almost gone. Just when hope seems to be fading, they spot an island in the distance and head toward it. However, as they approach the shore, the great whale attacks them once again, smashing their boats. Somehow, despite the destruction, they manage to reach the island safely. Now completely out of food, the crew is forced to eat whatever they can find on the barren island. The place is lifeless and mysterious, with no sign of civilization. While exploring, they discover a cave filled with human skeletons. The horrifying sight makes them realize that other people had once reached this island, but none of them ever made it back alive. Knowing they cannot stay there forever, they decide to repair their broken boats and leave. However, one of Owen's friends and a few other crew members choose to remain on the island. They believe that facing starvation there is still better than going back into the ocean, where the great whale could attack them again. They also have very little food and only a few damaged boats left. Owen promises them that if he survives and reaches civilization, he will send help for them. The movie then jumps forward by 48 days. We see that Owen and the remaining survivors are still drifting helplessly in the middle of the ocean. They are extremely weak and starving. By this point, one of the crew members has already died. Left with no other option, they make the heartbreaking decision to use his body for food. Overcome by hunger and the instinct to survive, they do the unthinkable and eat their dead companion. The movie then jumps forward by another month. We see the survivors still drifting helplessly in their small boats. By this point, they are completely exhausted, and the hunger has pushed them to the edge. Realizing that they may not survive otherwise, they decide to play a deadly game. The rules are simple. The one who loses will be sacrificed so that the others can stay alive. As fate would have it, George loses the game. Accepting his destiny, he hands his gun to his cousin and asks him to pull the trigger. But instead of killing George, his cousin turns the gun on himself and takes his own life. With no other choice left, the starving survivors use his body for food. A few days later, the great whale appears once again. Filled with anger, Owen prepares to kill the beast. However, when he looks into its eyes, he sees something that changes his heart and decides to spare its life. The great whale quietly swims away. Several more days pass before a ship finally spots George's boat and rescues the remaining survivors. Meanwhile, Owen and Thomas are stranded in another boat, and their condition is just as terrible. Fortunately, after some time, another passing ship notices them and saves them as well. A few days later, Owen and the handful of survivors finally return to their hometown. Owen reunites with his wife after believing he might never see her again. Soon after, the owners of the whaling company call both Owen and George and ask them what really happened during the expedition. Owen tells George that they should reveal the truth, and George decides to tell them everything. Back in the present day, Thomas finally finishes telling his story. The writer listens to every heartbreaking detail, thanks Thomas for sharing it, and promises that he will write down the incredible story of Thomas and his fellow crew members so that their struggle is never forgotten. And with that, the movie comes to an end.